So let's just go ahead and get right into the class. First things first, the color wheel, right? We're all familiar with the color wheel. We're familiar with the primary colors, red, yellow, blue. Now these are the basic colors that with those things, you can make any other color in the world that you want. You can make your purples by combining red and blue. You can make your orange. I won't even get into that, but that's what the color wheel is. The style wheel is kind of the same thing. You use these primary elements of style and you combine them to create any other style that you want. The primary elements of the style wheel are number 1, figurative. Number 2, symbolic. And number 3, abstractive, okay? And these, I'm gonna get into more, but these are the basic fundamental building blocks that we're gonna be dealing with in trying to understand, I guess on a basic level, how you can take a human character that's very representational and turn them into something stylized and appealing, all right? So figurative is representational. It's concerned with realistic lighting, realistic rendering of an object. The coloring is very much from life, and it's very concerned with 3D form and really just showing visually on a piece of paper or on an animated screen, showing what our eyes see or how our eyes understand and see the world as we actually see it, okay? That's figurative. Symbolic is basic shapes and lines. And these are basic shapes and lines that are really concerned with the idea of a thing. Okay, we're going on a different level here. It's not what you physically see, but it's the idea of a thing. It's the simplest, most direct way to communicate. Okay, I'm gonna get into this deeper, but this is just the first pass at it. And then lastly, we have abstractive, okay? Stylized shapes, colors, proportions. That's what that's all about. It's just concerned with the emotional connection that these shapes and these colors and these proportions kind of convey to us and how they make us feel. Okay? It's reshaping these objects to elicit some sort of emotional response. All right? The best way to simplify this down is figurative is what your eye sees, so it's your eyeball. Abstractive is what you feel, so it's your heart. And symbolic is what your brain thinks and how it understands things, and so it represents your brain. That's the basic, most simplest way to understand it. All right, let's break that down even further, okay? So here we have our style wheel, and we're gonna build on that. All right, here in the corner of the style wheel, I have a symbol of an eyeball, right? That's an eye, that's a basic understanding of an eye, but we see that it's an eye, but we do not know, is that a male eye? Is it a female eye? Is it a child's eye? Is it an animal's eye? We don't know. All we know that symbol represents eye, okay? We need more information. We need other elements from the style wheel to tell us more about what that thing is, okay? So let's go over to the representation figurative side of it. Now we see, okay, it's a human eye. It's possibly a female eye. We can see that it's shiny, that it's lit well, all right? But do we know that if this is a nice person? Do we know if it's a mean person? Do we know if it's a sad person? We don't know much just by looking at this eye. This eye is just telling us, okay, it's a human person and it's lit and it's rendered in this way, okay? We need more information. So we're gonna go up to the abstractive section, all right? And here we just have a shape. Now this shape is a triangle. It's cut in a very sharp, aggressive way, okay? It's just a shape, but it looks threatening maybe. There's an imposing cut to the angles, right? But from that shape, we can't tell, is it an eye or is it even human? We need to combine these 3 elements together to actually make something stylized. And so I'm going to combine those together in the middle here. And here we have this stylized eye, and we can see, okay, this is a female eye. This may be the eyeball of a villain with the way that it's shaped. And it's simplified down to a form so that it's very much not full-on representational, not full-on figurative, and not full-on symbolic, but it's getting the impression that this is an eye, and it's the eye of probably a villain, all right? So by combining these three, you have stylized a human eyeball, all right? And that's just a simple exercise that you can try doing to really get the basis of understanding these things. Here we have figurative representational drawing of an ear. We can tell it's an ear. Maybe it's a male ear or a female ear. It doesn't matter. But we see that it's an ear. Going on to the symbolic side, there we have what looks like the letter C. But in context, when you put that C on the side of a head of a character, then you see that that's an ear. So that C, that letter C, represents basically ear to our brain. We see that, we think, oh, ear, okay? Now up on the abstractive section, I just drew a square turned up on its side, almost like a diamond, all right? And what that's telling us is, maybe it's not eliciting any sort of emotional thing, but it's giving us something more to do with these two extremes of the figurative and the symbol. And it's making us able to add some sort of visual element to it to stylize it. So in the middle here, I'm going to do the stylized version of that ear. And there we have it. And you can see that I've applied that abstract shape to the ear, to this figurative ear. I've given it some rendering like we would have on the figurative version of the ear, but then I've simplified it to the point where it's getting into a symbolic range of what an ear is by adding the linear elements to it. All right? Is this making sense? I hope this is making sense. If not, stop right here, go back, watch it again. Okay, so we've got our style wheel here, and let's apply this stuff to an actual full-on character. I've just done an eye, I've just done an ear, but let's take it further with the full-on character here, okay? So here we have a symbolic representation of a human. Traditionally, this is the symbol for a male, but really it's a human. It's got a ball, not even a ball, just a circle for the head. It's got really simple lines for simple shapes for the arms, legs, but we know, okay, it's a human, all right? Let's go over on the other side, and we see here we're getting all this information from the figurative side that this is a male human. It's rendered, it's lit very well. There's a nice lighting to it. There's a nice color to it. It's in full color, okay? But combining these together, if we were to just take these two elements and simplify that human down into a more symbolic shape, we'd have a boring character. Maybe I'll try drawing what that character might look like. You could, let's get a different color here. If I were to go over here on this side, and just simplify this guy down, you're getting kind of like I don't have room for his full legs, but you're kind of getting maybe a more comic booky style character where it's heavily based in a figurative sort of representational style. And looking at this guy, and we'll add a little bit of eyes there, we see, okay, this is a little bit more stylized version than the representational. I'm just doing, little balls for the hands, so it's kind of like a symbol of what a hand could be. But does this character, is it appealing? Is this design anything that you'd want to read an entire book about or watch a movie about? No, you need to add some abstract elements to it to give it life and to give it some sort of emotional connection, okay? So let's add our abstract elements. And here what I've done is I've got a gray upside down triangle. Now, if you've seen in our other classes, we have some character design classes, we have some color classes, and even in our how to draw everything class, we talk a lot about shapes, and we talk a lot about colors, and we talk about the psychological side of shapes and colors, right? Triangles, squares, circles, all have this baggage that they carry with them. And when you see things that are shaped round and curvy and circularly, is that even a word? I don't know. When you see things like that, you automatically apply that to things in nature and in life who that are round and soft. And you think of things like babies, round and soft, clouds, fluffy, puffy, fruit, round and appealing, right? And then you take the shapes of sharp triangular things, and you look at like a great white shark, which is just made up of triangles, and those things are menacing and they're dangerous. Or you take, you look at something like a sharp rock sticking out of the side of a mountain, or even the sharp points to a mountain, and it's imposing and it's dynamic, right? All of these shapes have certain characteristics to them, certain baggage to it. Color's the same way. We apply certain things to colors. Red oftentimes means passion or intensity. On the reverse side, you have grays and dark grays and light grays, and those usually imply some sort of passivity, or it could mean a lack of color. Might mean if it's applied to a character that a person is not concerned so much with the I don't know how to say this, like living life to its fullest, and if they're shrouded in grays, they might be more under, they'll sometimes say under a cloud, right? Things like that. So here I have my abstract shapes here. I've got an upside down triangle made of grays. I've got some flesh tone colors. I've got a striped pattern. And when I apply it to this figurative representational image of a male, and I apply it to this symbolized version of a human, what do we get when we combine these three? And here we have Gru from the Minions, okay? Gru is this perfect combination of these three elements of style, right? You've got the abstract things, the abstract elements coming into play here, which are really giving him these broad shoulders, these narrow limbs, the gray colors that he wears. You also have this realistic rendering that you have from the lighting that they've done on the character. He's got realistic shadowing. He's got bounce light happening to him. The textures on his coats or his clothing and his scarf and his skin are all very realistic. Yet he's stylized, and to a point that there's some very almost symbolic representations of what a face, a nose, a hand, an eyeball could be. It's simplified. Down a degree. So this is how you apply these three elements to actually create a full-on character. Okay, let's do one more character while we're at it. Here we have again a symbolic representation of a human, and here we have a picture of an old man. All right. Combining these two, you might get a more simplified version of an old man, but when you start adding the abstract elements, that's when you actually start making a character, okay? My abstract elements here are squares, rectangles and squares. And what's the emotional connection that we have with rectangles and squares? Usually rectangles, something, oftentimes there's the slang that someone might say, don't be square, right? And that comes back to this idea that being square or square things are immovable. They're very stable. It's not a dynamic shape. It's a firm shape. And when you see square-ish, imposing square shapes in nature, it's the same thing. A tree trunk, a boulder, a brick, a giant rock in these big, like square shapes. Okay, And so I here have these square shapes. So I want to apply that to my character. And I also have these muted colors, grays and browns and this sort of muted flesh tone color. And when I apply that to an old man and I apply that to this symbolic shape of a human, what character do I get? Let's apply these two together here on this side. So let's not even worry, not even concern ourselves with the representational part of it, but let's look at combining just the shapes with the symbolic version of a human. And here we're starting to get a character, and he might start looking a little familiar here. And you can probably start to tell this is Carl from Up, Carl Fredricksen, Mr. Fredricksen. I don't think I'm on a first name basis with them just yet, so we'll call him Mr. Fredricksen. And so you can see here, like he's got these symbolic human shapes, but we're applying these abstract shapes to him as well, and we're getting this very square, rigid person. When we start adding the representational stuff, the nice lighting, the dimensionality to it, the textures, then we get this character right here. The actual character that Pixar made of Carl, right? He's got the realistic lighting, he's got the shadow, the bounce light, the nice rich rendering of textures on him. And I think he's the perfect mix between these three elements of abstract, figurative, and symbolic. All right? So that's how you combine these things together. And that's really when I'm designing a character and when I'm thinking about character design, these are the elements that I'm thinking of. How far do I want to go with the figurative? How far do I want to go symbolic? If you lean too far one way, how far abstract do I want to go? All of these things come into play. And if you lean too far one direction, what does that do to your character? Does it make them more, can you connect to them better? Or is it harder to connect to them? Can you imprint yourself on your character if they're more of a symbolic representation, or if it's something that's very figurative and very rendered? Then it's maybe us watching that character and not seeing ourselves in them, but seeing what they do in front of us. Okay? Okay, so what I want to do now is I've got some examples. I've pulled some examples from characters from children's books, characters from animated films, and I'm applying them to the actual style wheel and seeing where they fall on that style wheel. Are they more figurative? Are they more symbolic? Are they more abstract? So let's go through that just to really drive this point home and to nail it. All right. So here we have our style wheel. And again, we have the abstract, we have the figurative, and we have the symbolic, the heart, the mind, and the eye. And let's go ahead and look at our first example. This right here is a character by John Klassen from the book Extra Yarn. It's a children's book that did really well. I think it got a Caldecott honor. Really cool book. You should check it out. Really neat style, and I really like John's style. It's very much falls into this abstract symbolic range right here, and you can see in my my dot that I put on here. I feel like this is perfectly balanced between abstract and between symbolic, right? You have this character who these dots are really not eyes. I mean, if you looked at that dot by itself, it's not an eye, but in the context of where it is placed on the head, that dot is a symbol. It's a symbolic of what an eye is, okay? Our brain interprets that and sees a dot right there and thinks, oh, eye. It doesn't need any other information. It doesn't need lighting. It doesn't need rendering. It doesn't need that like shiny glare on the eye to tell us that that's an eye. And so what John's doing here with this design is he is simplifying it to the point that he just wants these images to read quickly, and so he's balancing that between this symbolic part and also this abstract part. Now, where does the abstract come into play? He's using color, he's using some texture, And he's using these proportions to give us a little more information about this character, telling us that it is a female, that she feels contemplative somewhat by the way that her mouth and her nose and her pose are displayed. So this right here, again, halfway between these two. The reason this dot is not concerned at all with figurative is because there's no lighting on this. There's no shadow on this. There's no realistic rendering. This is very much in this range of linear shape, line, things like that. Okay, let's look at our next example. All right, this is an illustration by William Joyce, and this is from a book that came out recently. I forget the exact title of the book. Something like a bean. I won't even mess it up right now, but it's about Jack and the Beanstalk. So look up William Joyce and type in Jack and the Beanstalk if you want to get this book. The illustrations in it are just delightful. I love them. But if you look at these characters here, and I'll zoom in on them, these characters really fall into this symbolic range. You just have a round ball for a head, round balls for hands, simple shapes for the arms, for the eyes. It's very symbolic. But what he's done is he's rendered them realistically. Okay? He has given them light and shadow and dimension and some nice texture to them. And that's all stuff that you don't get from abstract. You get it from the figurative section of the style wheel. Okay? So if you look at these guys, he easily could have just gone, if he wanted to not have added the light and the shadow and the rendering, and just could have had these be flat shapes. But I think what he does is he takes it's really nice. He takes this symbolic, here's a round ball. This symbolizes a head, but then he adds that dimension to it, and I think what you get is a really nice outcome. They almost feel like toys, like those little toys that you had as a kid, or even I remember my grandpa used to make wooden toys, and you just get a ball and you'd get a cylinder and you'd glue it on the top and paint them red and flesh colored, and it was very simple, childlike, and I think that's kind of what's going on here. Really cool. All right, let's look at the next one. The next example. All right, this is Mo Willems. He's another children's book illustrator and author. And this is from the book Knuffle Bunny. And what you can see here is this is very much on this side of the style wheel. There's no lighting, there's no shadow, there's no dimension to them. It's just flat shapes. It's just lines. And so we're staying on this side of the style wheel. The reason I inched this dot up closer to abstract is because I think what he's done is he's taken these really abstract shapes of the pant legs, the head, the nose, those types of things, and the colors, and he's added a lot to these characters to give them life and to give them personality. So you can see that, again, it's very simple. It's just a triangle, and that triangle symbolizes a nose. Our brain thinks triangle, it's on that part of this shape that looks like a head, that's a nose. And so that's getting in the symbolic zone. But because he's added such flair and such interestingness to the shapes, what we've got is something that leans more abstract and I think more emotional and gives us a nicer connection to these characters than if he had gone really extreme symbolic with their style. All right, let's look at another one. All right, this is concept art for, I don't know, this isn't even concept art. This is actually final pixel art for Wreck-It Ralph. And I put this on there. It's just really interesting. I was flipping through the Wreck-It Ralph book, The Art of Wreck-It Ralph, and lots of great design in that book. You should check out that book if you haven't. Just fun explorations of how they figured out all the different characters and the worlds and things like that. But what's cool about this is when you get into that pixel art, especially 8-bit or 16-bit pixel art, is now you're dealing with such small bits of information that you really have to live in that symbolic range, right? That symbolic section of the style wheel, because when you're playing with 1 or 2 pixels to tell us what an eye is or what a hand is or what a mouth is, you don't get to play in the abstract land. You don't get to play in figurative land. You have to really be strategic with how you do it. And it's some nice limitations. So what they've done here with Wreck-It Ralph, and I'll zoom in, is you can see his eyes are just a square with another little square in there. The toes are just a couple of these little pixels together. But on a whole, you've got this nice, interesting shape. He's very square, he's very boxy, and that's telling us a lot about who this character is. And so that's why I put him halfway between abstract and symbolic. We don't have rendering on here. We don't have light and shadow. We don't have texture really. It's pretty cut and dry. And so this is another way to have your character happen between symbolic and between abstract. Okay, let's look at the evolution of this character. So now they're taking him from that pixelated version, and how do we figure out how this character looks like in the other part of the movie? And this design is really cool. I like this design. It says it's by Bill Schwab, a Disney artist. And you can see here, we're getting much closer to the abstract land, okay? Again, there's nothing really figurative about this image. There's no rendering, there's no lighting to it. Maybe there's a little texture that we could say is some figurative stuff that's happening, but this is very much abstract shapes leaning on being symbolic of what is a hand, what is a nose, what is an eyeball. And so this is another example of how you can play between those two and push it more abstract or push it less, more symbolic, and really find a place for your character to live. I think because of these abstract shapes, these squares and how big his hands are and these proportions that they've done, you really get this idea that this is a tormented character. This is a character who's had to deal with a lot, and especially with that expression there. Okay. All right, let's go to the final version of evolution of Wreck-It Ralph, and here we have all this information that we've been building on. We have simplified shapes, but inspired and influenced by abstract. Okay, so we've got these big squares. We've got his nose. If you look at it, it's pretty much just a round ball. That's very symbolic. That's just a basic shape, and it our brain tells us that is a nose, but it's rendered beautifully. It's got light and shadow on it. It's got texture on it, and the specific shape of that, it's squished just a little bit. Just in that nose, it tells us, okay, on the abstract, on the emotional side, they're giving it some sort of playfulness that makes it, that really makes it, I think, helps the character be emotional, helps us to connect to him emotionally. You look at the shape of the fingers, the toes, the ears, even the hair patterns. Everything's simplified, and in these abstract shapes that are designed to elicit some kind of emotion in us. In that we see that he's confident and he's tough. He's got these big, massive hands that are very powerful, but yeah, he's also mixed with these softer shapes that tells us there's a heart in this character as well. So, and you add the realistic rendering, and I think what we've got here is this nice balance between all three elements of style. And what's interesting is, so far, I mean, we've got some more examples that kind of push and pull on here, but so far we see, if you're going into animation and you're designing a character, they really want in all of these characters, there's this perfect balance between these elements. And I think once you start leaning a certain direction in some way, your character might be better for children's books or illustration or a book cover or something like that. Okay, so let's move on to the next. This is by Peter DeSev. He's an artist based in New York, great illustrator. You should, if you're not already familiar with his work, you should be. You should check out his stuff. Does a lot of New Yorker covers. And this is a character from a picture book that he did. And this character, I put him on here because he really is the opposite of the other characters I've been showing, which are more abstract and symbolic. He's got the realistic rendering on him and the lighting, or at least that's leaning that way. It's leaning less on, here's a symbol of what I think a nose or an ear or a hand or a head should be, and it's more leaning on what is a figurative representational design of a human tell us and inform us about this character. But I have it leaning up towards abstract. And you can see here, because you've got, nobody is really this thin. Nobody is really, their head is really this round. And because these abstract shapes are playing into this, they're telling us more about this character, that he's wiry, he's probably a more comical character. And then again, with the rendering, it's got some really nice lighting and texture to them. Okay. All right. This is by Peter Brown, children's book illustrator. And you can see here, look at this character is very, very simplified. He's not adding too much with the abstract side of things. He's just keeping these basic shapes. It's a round head. The proportions are very, the proportions aren't extreme at all. It's head, it's body, it's legs. And so I put him down here because these characters, if they were just rendered, if they were just silhouetted, would look a lot like our symbol of a man that we showed before. But he's rendered these characters out really beautifully. With the light and the shadow to them. They have dimension to them. They have shape to them. And so that's why I put him closer, halfway between these two, but with inching towards the abstract. He's really coming in this halfway point between figurative and symbolic. But because there is a little bit of style to how he's done the hair, or how he's done some of the colors and things like that. There's some abstract influence to that design. All right, let's look at this next one. This is Peter Brown as well. That last one was from A Curious Garden. Really good, really great book. Beautiful illustrations. And this is from one of his earlier books, Chowder, which is about these two hipsters who have a pet dog, and the dog's really quirky and fun. So you look at these guys, and this is the reason I wanted to show two examples of the same artist, is show how an artist can go back and forth between styles. These guys lean the other direction. Their shapes are much more abstract and designed to have a little more flair to them, to have a little more design to them. We get these shapes like he's telling her that this woman is soft, that she's got curves to her. We look at this man, he's got broader shoulders, obviously, but there's a softness to him as well. These are guys that you can say may be living in a really easy life. They're not, there's no hard edges to them. Look at how the hair is rendered and the lighting and the shadow and things like that to them. And so you can see they're definitely leaning more towards the abstract side of the style wheel, and less on this symbolic stuff, and less on this the rendering of a figurative approach to them. The colors are a little bit flatter. There's some light and shadow to them. What is the reason for going this direction? Why did he do a character like this for A Curious Garden, and why did he do characters like this for Chowder? I think Curious Garden was really about the garden and not so much about the boy. And so if you look at that and you read that book, the garden is the main character. The boy is just there to facilitate us to experience the garden. And so if he made the boy character, so appealing and so identifiable, or a character that you just identify with and you want to become, you're less worried about the garden and you're more worried about this boy. And by keeping him simple and keeping him symbolic and iconic, it allows us to focus on the garden, which is the main character of the book. Now, if you look at this one, why are these characters more like this? And I think what it is the book is really about Chowder the dog, and the Chowder's parents or owners. I call him parents because he's sitting in a baby carrier. They really treat him like a baby in this book. But I think the reason here is because these characters do play a role in his life, and there's somebody that maybe he wants us to identify with as well. All right, so that's 2 samples from the same illustrator. Here's some concept art from Brave. And this is just a really, really beautiful rendering of Merida. I think that's what her name is. This hair is very figurative and realistic, but it's got such a design and a flair to it that I put this, and same with her arm and her figure and everything, that I put this leaning more towards the abstract side of the style wheel. But because it's rendered out and there's light and shadow to it and cast shadow and bounce light, it's got a firm foothold in figurative. Not so much in the symbolic range, because this illustration is really about us identifying and being emotionally attached to this character, unless this is a female, right? Which is what symbolic does, is it just tells our brain, this is what this thing is. Okay. All right, here's concept art from Bolt. Really, I don't know if it's underrated, but people don't talk about it as much as other Disney films. And I like this film a lot. I thought it was really good. So check it out. If you haven't checked it out, watch it again if it's been a while. It's a great little film. And the design to it, the art direction to it, I thought was really cool as well. About this image, and this is the kind of style you see a lot of times with animation concept art, is very linear and very much just about getting an idea across and getting proportions across. And so I have this leaning over more towards this side of things, where it's about the abstract shapes, but yet we're relying on symbols to tell us what certain objects are. If you look at her nose and if you look at his mouth, that U shape, we see a U shape. We see 2 dots in a U shape. We know smiley face, it symbolizes happiness. And he's getting into that realm here in this design. U shape, the eyes are very simplified and dotty. And so that's some symbolic stuff happening to simplify the characters and to make them, and to really make them appealing. These shapes, these proportions, these colors are all there to help us identify certain attributes of these characters. Why is Bolt white instead of black? Why is or brown or spotted or things like that? White symbolizes heroicness, like the knight and the white knight in shining armor, things like that. He's a hero dog, and so he's this brilliant pale white color. She's wearing reds and it's kind of I want to say greenish, but it's really not. It's kind of these warm grays. She's really spunky, and she's this child actor that's trying to strike out on her own and figure out life and things. And so they give her red hair and they give her a red shirt, and that contrasted with Bolt is just a really nice, appealing thing. And it's all stuff that's bleeding in from the abstract side of the style wheel. Got a handful more of these. Okay, so here we have 2 examples from the Flying Books of Morris Lesmore. And the reason I put these in is to show what happens when you go between a full-on figurative rendering and just a linear rendering. So this is just line work, whereas this is more painted. What does it do to the character? How does it change the character? Which one of these characters are you most likely to identify with or want to follow the story with? Who knows? But I just share these to show you that you've got options when you're rendering a character. And I think what we do when we see a character that's more rendered out and more fleshed out, like in this figurative approach, and this is his dot right here, and this guy, this is his dot right here. This is where he lands on the style wheel. One of these I think you can identify with a little more, or maybe recognize, maybe be more invested in, who knows? One of them, maybe you might, because they're more simplified, your brain is having to fill in the gaps, and maybe you become that character more. There's some philosophy behind that the more simple the character looks, the more, if you think about Tintin and Charlie Brown, which their eyes are just dots and the line work is very simple, because they're so simple and because we have to do more to fill in the gaps, that we become those characters more, and we feel, because we're becoming them, we're feeling sadder when he doesn't kick the football, or we're feeling, in Tintin, we're feeling more of the peril because we're there, we're being him. It's really interesting stuff that you might want to play with in your designs. I share Paranorman because, I haven't had an example of stop motion in here, or something actually rendered physically, but he's a good example of figurative. Everything's super realistic. The nose has nostrils on it. The mouth has lips and curvature to it. The eyes have the eyes have iris and a pupil to it. All of these things are coming from the figurative side of things. None of this is a symbolic representation of what an eye is, or what a mouth is, or what an ear is. Yet the design of the character is getting all of this information coming from the abstract side of the style wheel. I have this example from the Crudes here because, there's a section of the film where they're all in cave painting. And what's really neat about that is you look at the design and the style of these characters, and it's very shape-based. And they're applying certain shapes to all the characters, this sort of diamond curvy shape for the girl, which is something dynamic. Diamond shapes and curvy shapes playing against each other really tells us that this is a complex character. The boy, the mom, the dad, they're all these bigger, bulkier characters looking, and their actual personalities are like these lumbering, bigger, bulky type of things. On the flip side, here you have a much more rendered out concept art for these characters, and we get away from that side of the style wheel, and we come all the way over to the other side, where it is still about shape. It is still about these weird shapes coming together to make dynamic characters, but it's all rendered out realistically. So it's on that figurative side. Are you guys getting this? Is this making sense? And I'm really trying to. I could have shared 2 examples, but I wanted to share a ton of examples just to show you how many different options you have here in stylizing and designing characters, and what's gone before you. And really the key thing when you're getting into this and you're lost in, how do I make this character, how do I stylize this character? Go through and look at all of your favorite characters from children's books, from comic books, from animation, things where characters are really stylized, maybe some editorial art or some book covers or things like that. Look at these characters and think, what is it that's appealing about this character? And then what I want you to do is copy it. Just start copying these characters. Have a little sketchbook where you do, and I say copying, but I guess the more artistic term is to do studies, master studies. But really what you're doing is, by copying that thing, by drawing it, what they've done in your book, is you are really deconstructing the way that they've done that. And you're learning by going through the actions of doing it. I'm going to share 3 more images here on this, just to drive it home. Here we have Astrid this is early concept art for Astrid from How to Train Your Dragon. And the character designer is really concerned with shape and getting interesting shapes and putting interesting proportions and shapes together to get across that this character is fun, it's energetic, she's adventurous. The limbs are thin, but yet there's a weight to them. She's got these big hair ponytail things coming out the side of her head. And that's just a fun, interesting design. It adds something visually heavy up at the top. And who knows what that kind of does to us psychologically. If we look at her final rendering here, and you can see the difference between these two. This is the same character done, but yet they're falling on two sides of this style wheel. Here, because it's all linear and it's shape-based, it's very much falling on that side of the wheel. Go to the other side, and because it's rendered out beautifully and there's lighting and shadow to it, it's still the same shapes, it's still the same proportions. Now there's color added to it, but it falls on this side of the wheel. Okay, why wasn't the film animated two-dimensionally like this versus what they did go with the three-dimensionality of this? Maybe it's a way that they could, it has to do with the tools that they have at their disposal, but it's also, maybe it's a way that we can relate with the characters more. There's all kinds of baggage that different styles carry with them. Lastly, for examples, I share this picture book from Dan Santat called Beagle. And this is one of the pages where the girl meets her imaginary friend for the first time. And if you look at these designs, he's getting in this nice area where he's leaning more towards what you get from an animated film, where the characters are fully rendered, but yet they have these very beautiful symbolic shapes to them, combined with the abstract, the abstractness to them, and coming together to make a really solid design. She's got this big head. She's got this little body. Beagle's just one basic egg shape. It's a lot of fun, these designs, and that's really where he's falling. All right, let's talk about proportion. Okay, from this point on, it's less theory and more practical stuff. Okay, proportion. If you look at here we have your really traditional looking human male-female proportions, right? This is the kind of stuff you're learning in life drawing. This is a these aren't realistic representations, but this is realistic proportions of humans. It's just a linear drawing, right? And if you look at it, the male is about 8 heads tall. And really, when you're studying proportions and you're studying things like that, you can see that from the top of the head to the chin, that's one head. You take the chin and you do another head, and it comes down to mid-chest. And really, the design of a human is cut in half right at the hips, right below the hips. From here to here and from here to here, same distance. So usually the legs, full extension of the legs, is the same proportions as the head. This isn't a class about proportions. This is about stylizing, right? But this is something you got to keep in mind. If you go to a female, about 7.5 heads as well. And again, humans are all different shapes and sizes. This is your median, right? This is your average. But when you're stylizing a character, this is something you got to think about. Proportion is huge, and proportions tell a lot about what a character is and what they're going to do. So this is one of the first things I want you to do as you're stylizing your character and you're thinking about your character is just start messing with proportions. Look at the character you want to draw and start messing around. Let's see what happens when we make their head bigger and make their body smaller, and where's that sweet spot. What I have here is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 heads, and this is what a 6-headed character looks like. You can see here the head's a little bit bigger. I've specifically made these characters gender neutral because this applies to whether you're doing a female character or a male character. But look at that head size, and maybe do a little exercise on your own where you take all of your favorite characters that you've in all of your books and your films that you love, animated films and comics and things, and just map them out and see what their proportions are, how many heads tall are they, how big is their body. But you see here, halfway and halfway, we've got the head and to the hips, and also we've got the legs. So this is one approach. Okay, let's look at the next one. This is a 4-headed tall character. Okay, so here I have him with his 4 heads divided up. The head gets very big here, but for this one I played with a little bit. I made his body the same size as his head, and then had the lower 2 legs, or the lower 2 heads proportions be the length of the legs. So what we've got is a long-legged character with a big head. It's really interesting looking. It might be a cool style. But I've got another version here where I brought that leg and that hip middle section down a little bit. It's probably 2/3 from this bottom part up right here. And what does this do to your character? I think what's happening here is, if you just look at it like this out of context, the longer legs, you could see this being a cartoony adult. And with these shorter legs, this could be like a cartoony, and by cartoony, I mean stylized, a child, right? Actually, that cartoony, stylized, those terminology, I'm going to digress here for just a minute, okay? Go off script, but this is something that happens a lot when you're dealing with art directors and editors and people that you're working with, clients, right? It's this terminology, and I get this a lot where it's like, we like this character design, but we just feel like he's too cartoony. And what does that even mean? And they know exactly what it means in their head, but something gets lost in translation because my understanding cartoony might be different from their understanding cartoony. Or they might say, could you make it more stylized? Or it's too stylized. And I think what you really have to do when you're dealing with clients like that is figure out exactly what they're saying when they say stylized. And I think this is a good chance for you to bring up the style wheel and say, okay, by cartoony, do you mean we're leaning more on this symbolic side, like all of the characters' main facial and body traits are more symbolic and less representational? Do you want it to go more representational? Is that what the issue is? Or are we leaning so abstract here that you feel like it's become way too much about the emotional and these colors and these shapes and these proportions, and you want to bring it back down into reality a little bit? That's something that you can play with now because you have this terminology and you have these elements of style with the style wheel. It's something that you can use to just really get to the point. And I've wasted a lot of time not understanding what they mean by, well, can you make it more stylized, or can you make it less cartoony, or can you make it more, oh, that's interesting, it looks really animated. What does that even mean? You have to get it to terms that we all can understand. And so that's just something I thought about right here. Okay, so going back to these proportions, now I have 3 head tall. What happens when we make a character that's 3 heads? So here I have his head being 1 head, his body being 1 head, and his legs being 1 head. This character all of a sudden looks very cartoony. And by cartoony, I mean stylization that we usually see with cartoons, with Mickey Mouse and Donald Duck and Daffy Duck and Bugs Bunny, and even you get into more contemporary stuff like SpongeBob and Chowder and Gumball, those types of things. They've got the big head and they've got the little bodies. So here we have divided into 3. But what happens when we push that even further and just make it a 2-headed tall character? okay? So now we have the head being half of the body and the body being the other half. Is that the head being half the body and the body? That's weird math going on there. What I mean is the head, the half of the whole character, and the body being the other half. And here we get into this world where this realm of super deformed and I want to say like it's humorous to have the head that big and the body that small. And you could find that in, this two head tall is something you see a lot in, I want to say like funny, humorous, comedic anime type stuff. They'll do the giant heads and they'll do the little bodies. If you think about the Miis from the Nintendo Wii, the Mii characters that you can make, they've got the giant head and they've got the little body. I think they're 2 heads tall, if I remember correctly. All right, so that's proportion. Let's go one more extreme. Let's do a 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 11-headed tall character. What does that look like with the head that tiny? This is something that you usually see in characters like the Hulk, right? He's got this tiny head on this massive body. And this character here is an 11-headed character. Wreck-It Ralph, he's got a smaller head in proportion to the rest of his body. What does that do to your character when you mess with the proportion that way? We see that making their head bigger makes them more childlike. What happens when you make their head smaller? He becomes more brutish and big. Okay, so that's the number one thing, and I think your first pass at stylizing a character is just start messing with proportions. You can add the abstract, symbolic, figurative stuff later, but mess with that proportion first and kind of get a feel for it, and then go into more specific stuff like how do I want to render the character? How simple do I want to make anatomical features on the character? What shapes do I want to use in this character? That's one approach. Let's talk a little bit about shape. I briefly mentioned shape earlier on. Circles, spheres, those types of things represent soft things, nurturing things. Triangles represent dynamic things, fast-moving things, sharp, dangerous things. Squares represent slower, immovable things, impenetrable things, things like that. When you're designing your character and you're working on proportion and you're working on shape at the same time and you're working on these different things, shape plays a role with it. And that's another approach you can go at. Instead of worrying about proportion, just start with shapes, putting shapes together and thinking about what if I make his head square? What if I make her head triangular? What if I make this character's body made up of all triangles? Carl Fredricksen is just squares, right? What happens when they're all triangles? So let's do that. Let's look at these characters, and I'm going to do a little draw over on them and see how shape plays into it. So here we have Russell from Up, and Up is just really a great film for looking at the shapes of characters and seeing what they tell us about who the characters are. Russell is, let's use a different color. Let's do pink. Russell is a egg-shaped fellow. His head's egg-shaped. The ears are egg-shaped. The arms are kind of egg-shaped. His whole body's egg-shaped. Even his legs are egg-shaped. Every little shape in this character is egg-shaped. And he's just a fun, lighthearted, innocent character. And it's using all these soft shapes, these really, I don't know what you'd call it, pleasant shapes, right? To make a pleasant character. All right. On the flip side, you have Carl Fredricksen. And as I pointed out before, every shape in this character is squares. Squares for the glasses, squares for the ears, squares. Even the fingers are squares, legs are squares, his body is square, except for his nose, which is nice and round. And I think that symbolizes, here you have this square, impenetrable, immovable character, and he's doing this crazy quest. He's lifted his house with balloons to take it to South America. It's absurd, and it's something that only could be done by someone as headstrong and as immovable in purpose as Carl, and his shape represents that. But he's got a soft side to him as well, as we see throughout the film. He really gets worn down by Russell, and I think what that nose implies that there is a softness to this character if you can get past the squareness. This is the kind of stuff you got to think about as you're designing a character, as you're stylizing your character. All of this stuff comes into play, and it's really, these advanced artists at Pixar are putting all of that into their character designs, and they're thinking about it. These characters are operating on so many different levels. All right, let's look at this kid from the Secret Garden. Not the Secret. Did I call it the Secret Garden before? It's forget what it's called. Okay, so look at him. It's a ball. It's sort of a triangle, and it's squares. And something happens when you put different shapes together, right? It tells us things. If we look down here, it's a ball, it's a triangle, it's a square, and then these little things. Proportion-wise, he is 1 head, 2 head, 3 head, basically. 3 head tall. All that's coming into play into this character, and here he actually changed a little bit. He might even be 4 heads tall or 3.5 heads tall. Sometimes in children's book you can be a little inconsistent, and I think that's fine. You do what's best for the illustration that you're doing, while still trying to stay on model with your character. But these are super basic, simple shapes. But he's stretched them out. He's pulled them in different places. But for the most part, simple, pretty simple. And it's because this is a simple character, and it's a character that we don't want to get into, like I said before, get in the way of the story. Here we have Dan Santat's character from Beagle. I'm just going to do a little draw over on her. You look at her proportions. She's got this big round head, and she is like 2 heads and a little bit, right? Basically, it's maybe a 2.5 head character. But what does that do? Something about that proportion, because it gets so far into the realm of childlike, kids have big heads and little bodies, right? And this is a very super extreme stylized version of that. It implies like a sweetness to them, an innocence to them, okay? So you have her playing off of Beagle, who is, basically a Russell character type of shape. He's this egg shape. But she's the ball, and then he's got all this roundness up here, and then this triangular shape down here. This triangular shape down here where it's playing against that roundness. And anytime you can play off of shapes like that, where you have some sharp, edgier shapes with some rounder shapes, that contrast creates, it's something interesting to look at. So that's something to think about. All right, here we have Paranorman, or Norman from Paranorman, I think that's what his name is. And you look at his proportions. His head with the hair is like that. And what I think we have here is a three-headed person. Look at the shapes, how this head is so much bigger and wider. His ears are wider than the rest of the body. Everything's thinner and smaller. And it's this contrast here that really makes an interesting character design. Peter Sev character here, look at him. He's got how many heads? He's got that little round ball at the top. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8.5. So he's a little bit taller character. And these are proportions, head to body proportions that are more traditional like the life drawing characters that I showed there, the human form, traditional human form. What happens though when you stick it on a super thin body is you essentially get, this lollipop type of thing happening with this round head on the top with the super thin body. What's cool about him is he's got this round repeating shape. These circles are repeating everywhere, and they're playing off of these super thin shapes. The thinness, and then he's got these triangular shape that really plants him at the bottom. Just a really nice design. And here we have, love this drawing, so good. This Merida drawing from Brave, and proportion-wise, this is her head. 3, 4, about 5.5 heads tall. It really works for this. Usually 5.5, the 5 head range can get really, I don't know, that's just like a stagnant proportion to it. But he's balanced, this artist, Steve Pilcher, balanced it with this big hair. And if you think about proportions that way, that's a part of the design as well. So you've got that, and then you've got this figure, this really curvy figure coming out of this big shape up here. When you think about your character, this is a good example. You think about your character that you're designing, this human that you're stylizing. Do they have big hair? If they have big hair, think about that basic shape of the hair. I have a daughter who has big curly hair like Merida does, but I wouldn't stylize it. Anytime I do a caricature of her, a little cartoon of her, I'll just draw it here. I'll draw her, she's got big eyes like that, and she's got this big hair, but I'll treat it like a triangle. So it'll come out like this, come out like that. And that's the way that I stylize her hair, okay? And really, it just comes out of her head like that. It never it just falls down from it, and it spreads out like that. And so it's this triangular shape that I'm using for my basic shapes. So there's that. And then lastly, I really like this image from the Crude's concept art. And if you look at these basic shapes, I talked about it before. It's this sort of diamond shape, playing off of each other within these round pieces. Same with him. Lots of diamond shapes going on in these characters, diamonds and diamonds and diamonds, but then balanced with the roundness. And so what happens when you get diamonds and rounds coming together, you get that contrast, which is just visual interest. Something to think about there as well. Now I want to get into specific body parts, okay? So the first one I talk about is hands and the basic shapes of hands and how you simplify hands. And what I'm going to do with each of these specific body parts is show how I go from what we understand is a complex shape to a simple shape. So this is really quick. We'll go through these. I'll make my brush a little bit bigger. So basic hand shape is made up of this rectangular cube thing, and then this sort of mitten piece coming out, and the thumb coming out there. Then you stick it on the arm like that. And if you understand those basic shapes, you can go as complex in that realm as you want, or as simple in that realm as you want. If I were to draw over that, do this right here, I could go in here and add knuckles and really make this feel like a more figurative looking hand. Come in here, add the tendons coming out like that, fingernails and little wrinkles on the knuckles and things like that. And let me take that away. And this looks like a more realistic looking hand. Or I could do, a Mickey Mouse hand, which is just the little tubes coming out of a ball, basically, right? So move that there, and turn this on and move that here. So with these basic shapes, you're getting a range. You can get a range. You can get the really cartoony Mickey Mouse stylized hands based on these abstract shapes, or you can get very specific and figurative by adding every little detail into it. So that's how you would simplify hands. You can go one extreme or the other extreme, or you can find something nice in the middle. If you look at a lot of Disney animated films from the 60s and the 50s, the hands were really well proportioned and well done. I'd studied those. Okay, so that's hands. Let's talk about ears. So an ear on one end of the spectrum has all of these inner folds coming into it, and ear canal and the earlobe and all that stuff, and really they're complex body part visually, right? There's a lot of dimension to them. On the other hand, you could do a Charlie Brown ear, which is just that, just the letter C, or Calvin from Calvin and Hobbes, right? If you look at, if I can remember how to draw Calvin. His ear is just that little C. His nose is just a little C, 2 dots for the eyes, right? I think that's how you do Calvin. So that's the other end of this spectrum. When you're doing a character, where does your character fit on that? What are you gonna do? The example, I added the cube shape to it, and I made a cube ear and just really simplified it like that. You could do that, or you could, say your shape is, something like that. So you do more triangular shaped ear, or you could, really just say, I want this character to be really soft and rounds, right? So you go in and you add that sort of design language to what you already understand an ear to be. And then you can go in on all of these if you want to and render them out, add some light and shadow to them. There's so many options for you, what you can do. I can't decide for you, but this is where you have to figure out what your story needs, what its character needs to look like, and just decide, okay, I'm going to add a little bit of rendering. I'm going to make things a little bit more simpler. That's all up to you. So that's how I do an ear. Let's look at eyes, okay? On one end of the spectrum of eyes, I've already drawn a really nice eye or shown you a really nice eye. There's no end to how you can do eyes. But you have the pupil and you have the highlight, and you can get in there and do all that stuff, right? And just really make it pretty. And then on the other end, you have that. You have Charlie Brown's eyes or Calvin's eyes, which are just a period, right? Where your eyes fall in the middle of the spectrum. Are you doing something like this? Are you doing something, like that? Are you, doing something more on this side of things, right? So this is the path that you must follow as far as how, again, going back to your character, how stylized are they going to be? They lean more realistic, or are they going to be more of a symbolic thing? And it comes to what your story wants it to be. So there's a range there, and then maybe you start adding shapes to it. Like, you've got the square, the triangle, and and the circle, and maybe this is what eyes look like there, and maybe this is what eyes look like here. And maybe this is what eyes look like there. Just think about what adding a certain shape to the eye does to it. All right, let's go to mouth. Okay, a mouth, another really complex body part. It's got lots of little pieces to it. And here I've just, made a generic one, right? Which is much more figurative. And then on the other end of the spectrum, you have a letter C that's turned on its back. And our brain looks at that. I mean, out of context, we can't tell what it is. But as soon as I add that to it, you're like, oh, it's a smile. It's a smiley face, okay? So this symbolizes a smile. And your smile could be something as simple as that. Your mouth could be something as simple as that. Or it could be something in between. Something like this. When I draw Littlebot and Sparrow for my children's book, I'm just going to do a little robot head here. He's got these little dots for eyes, and he's got this little mouth, which is nothing more than that. And it's because I wanted him to have a really simple face, because I wanted us to not get caught up in who this, the mechanics of this character. I just wanted a simple face that you could identify with and get behind and just experience, because the face is so simple, it's hard to do emotion. It's hard to show that he's sad. So I'm letting your brain, as you read the book, go into that character and fill in those gaps. And you could see, okay, maybe the mouth is turned down a little bit, but it's requiring us to add more of our own emotion to the character. And I think what that does is it makes the character more relatable, because we're having to take so much of ourselves and put it onto that character. So that's one reason you might want to do a character with a really simple face. On the other hand, if you want us to stand back and really just see how well you can show emotion on this character, maybe you do more realistic character designs and facial features and things like that. Let's do feet. Foot can be as, I remember I want to say I was in 4th grade or something like that. And I was drawing a superhero from the front. And I couldn't, for the life of me, figure out how to draw a foot from the front. I had drawn feet from the side so many times, right? And maybe from the top, because we always see our feet from the top with the toes sticking out. But looking at the front, that is super difficult, because it becomes this weird shape where everything's like foreshortened towards us. And I went to my mom. I'm like, Mom, you got to help me out. How do you draw feet from the front? And she's like, I have no idea. And she sat down and she kind of did her version of it. But it was just enough to get me going. Feet are really hard to do from the front, but I figured it out now. It took some life drawing to figure it out. But this is a foot from the front, from the more realistic side of things, figurative side of things. And then on the other side, what's the symbol of a foot? It's, it could be something as simple as that. If we went back to Calvin and Hobbes, I think his feet were nothing more than a thing like that. Charlie Brown, I can't remember, but I want to say his feet were just these little triangles, right? So where do you fall in here in your character design and the stylization that you're going to do? Maybe your foot is somewhere in the middle where you don't want all this anatomical detail to it, but you just need something, like that. Something really simple. Okay? And feet could be, I mean, honestly, there's artists who've gone their whole careers with never drawing a foot. They're always obscuring feet behind debris or smoke or bushes or in the grass or things like that. You can get away with it, but because the feet really aren't that expressive, but it's something to think about. Okay, let's do head. Okay, so a realistic head on this side. Come in here, and the head proportions, the eyes are always in the middle of the head if you're doing something realistically. The nose is about halfway through there, and the mouth is about halfway through there. So if you look at it like this, half, 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 right? And those are the realistic proportions. The ears coming down here like this. And then you could start adding in some features like eyes, the nose, the mouth here. And you start looking at this, and if you're doing a children's book where you need to have a more stylized character, something like this isn't going to cut it. On the other hand, the other extreme of a head on the symbolic side is that. But what happens when you start adding, again, our shapes, and you want to find something in the middle? Okay, start messing with proportions, start messing with shape, and that's how you start to stylize. So I'm going to go here, I'm going to make this guy's head a little more square. I'm going to put the eyes up here instead of in the middle. I'm going to put the mouth down here and the nose down here. And what do we get? We get this character that's really stylized. Not at all realistic, but he is, this looks like maybe he could be a thug or some sort of giant or ogre or something like that. Let's see what happens when we make something more rounded, and we put the eyes down here, and the big head. Now we've got, I'm going to put some hair on his head like that. Now we've got a little kid, maybe he could even be a baby, right? Something like that. Triangular head. What happens when we mix? Well, we'll just keep it simple for now. We make things a little more triangular shaped. What does that do to our character? Okay. If you think about the character Jafar from Aladdin, he's made up of all of these triangular shapes. So I'm mixing in triangles to this shape together, and I'm getting some really, let's add something over the top. This is getting fun. What happens when we do this? Maybe give him. I think this is what Jafar looks like from Aladdin. It's got the head right there. I don't know if we see ears or not. But you can see just by adding shapes and messing with proportions, now you're stylizing this character. You're getting away from this really boring, representational look, and you're getting to something really interesting and more exciting. Okay, what do we got here? Arms and legs. Okay, on the figurative side, you got muscles that make up the arm. There's no end to detail that you can add into arms. But this is, again, this is something you might want to do for comic book or something like that, adding all the muscles and things like that. But on the other side, you've got, Mickey Mouse's arm, which is just a rubber hose, right? That's the other extreme. So where does it fall in the middle? Where do you want to go with your character design? Let's do something that kind of gets us in the middle there and simplify it. Like it could be just something simple like that. You know, even more simple could be, and this is how I do arms a lot of times for my characters, is I'll just do a thin and then a thin coming up to this elbow region. Okay. That's arms. Legs are the same way. I mean, you could go super muscular with the legs and do every little tendon and joint in there. Got the foot like that, right? Or you could do on this extreme, like the rubber hose thing, like Goofy's legs are just, or even Donald Duck's legs are just this type of thing happening. Okay, what's the midpoint? You know, maybe it's something like a knobby little knee like that, or something as simple as that. Okay, what you're doing is you're finding the range and finding what's comfortable for you. And if you look at the examples that I shared, there's, you know, look at that and see what works. I think it's Dan Santat's character. His girl's legs were just like that, right? Just these little lines that come down, little really simple shapes. And then body, putting all this together. You know, if you've got this middle trunk section with the pectoral muscles and the abdomen, you know, the hip things coming in there and how the shoulders come out like that. Like you can get super complex. What's the simple version of that? Like we've seen in Russell or in Mr. Fredrickson. It could be as simple as just a cube or a sphere. What's the balance between those two? Sometimes I'll break it down to like 2 spheres and I'll just connect them like that. And that's my torso. And you stick a head on there, stick hands on there. And now I've got a stylized version of this. All right? And you have to think, what does your character need? Again, triangle, circle, square. If I were to apply those two, let's say I do more of a triangular character, maybe it's something where the shoulders are super narrow, the hips are super wide. What does that look like? You know, thinking about proportions, maybe the head's bigger, maybe the head's smaller. What does that do to your character when you design it like that? Okay, so these are all the factors that come into play when you're going from super realistic to super stylized, and you're applying those elements from the style wheel, the abstract, the figurative, the symbolic, and putting them together and making your own character. And all of these things come into play. What I want to do now, and this is what I'm going to close out this lecture with, is actually show you how I would stylize a picture of my son. Okay, so here we have Calvin. Let's make him a little bit bigger so we can see him better. Calvin's first grader in this picture. Cute little kid. And I'm going to do my version of him as if he was going to, let's say I'm doing a children's book and I want Calvin to be my main character and I'm basing it on my son. Let's make him a character in this children's book. I want him to be funny and relatable and approachable. He's a kid that maybe likes to explore, but he likes to crack a joke. This kid actually loves snuggles. Like that's his favorite thing. And he'll just come up to you and here's one thing that he'll do. I walked by him one day and he's reaching his hand out toward me. He's sort of shaking it like this, right? And I'm like, what are you doing? He's like, Dad, I'm using the force. I'm like, oh, okay. And so I played along with it, and I like walked towards him like he was pulling me with the force. And as soon as I got close to him, I was like, is he going to choke me? What's going to happen? And then he goes, force hug. He puts his arms around me, right? So that's this kid's personality. And we want that kind of personality to show up in the drawing, right? In this character design. So let's start figuring it out. He's got a big head, big round head. And I like this pose that he's in too. This is from our family pictures from last year. So let's do this big head. And let's do this body where his shoulders and his hips are kind of off kilter there. He's got his weight on this leg, and this leg is sort of coming out like that. And then foot's turning in, and this foot's turning in. And he's got hands in the pockets, right? Maybe lift these shoulders up a little bit, like that. Yeah, so what you can see here is I've made the head big. I've made him about 4 heads tall. Something like that. Yeah, 4 heads tall. That's the proportions I'm working with. And then the shapes that I'm playing off against each other are circles and squares, okay? And it's this contrast that's going to give this character some visual interest. And you know what? I think for this, looking at it again, I think for this design, we don't want his hands in the pockets. We want to be able to show his hands. Its hands are expressive. So I think what we'll do is we'll scrap that and just do another version, another pose, maybe a more neutral pose where he's just standing. I still like, that foot kind of cockeyed in like that. He's a little pigeon-toed. So I still like that. And then we'll just have his hands like sticking out like that. So there we go. This is the basic thing. I'm thinking about proportion. I'm thinking about shape at the same time. It's about 4 heads tall. You don't have to do the head thing, that line to figure out how many heads tall he is, but sometimes it helps. And then let's start messing with more detailed proportions here. I'm gonna lighten this up. This is why I like working in Photoshop so much. If this was drawing traditionally, I'd take the eraser and just kind of feather it down so that it's a little bit lighter. But this is so much easier in Photoshop. Okay, let's just work on the head here. Got a big head of hair coming out like that. And these big ears coming out the side like that. And then a little nose. Well, let's not do the nose. Chin. Okay, so this is my head shape. It's mostly round. And Calvin's got really big eyes. If you see him in person, these big eyes. So I want to play against that. Or not, I want to roll with that, not play against it, and give him some big eyes like this. And then just a little nose like that. He looks actually worried with the eyebrows like that. So we're gonna just do something like this, and we'll have an eyebrow go in there, and we'll see some of it right there. Give a little glint in the eyes right there, and then you can see his teeth sticking out underneath his lips there. Might add his teeth like that. Okay, so we have that. I'm just gonna do a little bit of detail in the ears there. This ear is actually down a little bit. Because he's tilted his head that way, this ear needs to be up higher like that. Just gonna color in the hair a little bit here like this. Let's zoom out. All right, so there's that. Now Head's feeling pretty good. Maybe add a little tuft of hair coming out like that. All right, let's go in here. Let's figure out the body. I'm not gonna do clothes yet. I'm just figuring out the body shape. You can add clothes on later. I'm taking that sort of squarish and I'm softening it a little bit. And just adding a little bit of dimension, figurative dimension to the limbs. Then feet, sort of pigeon-toed. Let's figure out these arms here. You can see I added a little bit of this line right here coming out, just to give the arms some dimension too. And then these hands are gonna be like that. Really soft, pudgy fingers. All right, so there we've got that. Now we're gonna lighten this one more time. And I'm gonna go over it with a darker line. Maybe we'll do an ink line. By adding the ink line, I'm getting into the symbolic range because ink is so cut and dry. You can, it's either white or it's black. There's no subtlety to it. And that's when you get into the symbolic side of the style wheel. Ink forces you to make a decision, like this line is gonna be here. When you're doing watercolor or pencil and you can really render and blend those things, you can have a subtlety to it. But because I'm adding ink to it, it's gonna lean on the symbolic side. So let's do his ears. This is a really good ink brush. Okay, you can see that I'm simplifying the shapes even more. Had I stuck with rendering in pencil or even just painting it, this stuff wouldn't look it would just make a different feel for it. And that's something I want you to practice when you're designing your own characters, is take the same character design and render it 3 different ways. What happens when you do no line? What happens when you do no line, but then realistic lighting to it? What happens when you do line with realistic lighting? Figure those things out and see what you like and see what works for what you're doing. Okay, I'm just gonna, I forgot to add clothes, so I'm just gonna add clothes here. Give him a collar. Don't like that collar, let's do a better one. Don't like that one either, let's do a better one. There we go. Got his shirt tucked in. And then we're gonna add, what's fun with pants is they've got all these wrinkles and stuff, and you see how he's really around kind of kid design. If we add some wrinkles in there, it just might make this design a little bit more appealing. Something like that. So now I'm adding these triangular shapes in there just to give it some visual interest. And then he's got the Chucks on, classic kid shoe. Like that. Get in here and add the arms. We'll finish that in ink, but just gonna add that, little pockets, and yeah, this is feeling good. I like how it flares out just a little bit towards the end here to balance out that big head on the top. All right, let's finish inking it and then we'll have a finished drawing. I like inking traditionally, and it's just, I feel like you can get a lot more subtlety and just a lot more expression with your line work when you ink traditionally. But for the case of this class, that's not too necessary. I made his cuff a little bit bigger there just to match that side a little bit better. I'm getting really, though, loose with my line work because I think it, number one, it's faster to draw this way, but number two, I think it'll add a nice, just a nice design element to this character. You know, if you're looking at this thinking, well, how do you do the shoes like just at the right angles? How did he know how to tilt that one shoe one way and the other shoe the other way? And it goes back to, Will has a class, I have a class on drawing shapes from different angles. Will's is how to draw objects in perspective, and mine is how to draw everything. Classes, you should check those out if you haven't already, because they teach you how to look at objects and think about objects in 3 dimensions and how to apply them in whatever shape that you want. There's also another class that I would do after you do those 2 classes, and that's posing characters. The posing characters class is great because in that I teach how, say you want a character, you don't know how to make them in a running pose, and how you use reference to apply to your character design and put them in a running pose. It's actually a good companion class to this one. You've designed your character, now how do you pose them? And I go really deep into how you break that character down into those shapes and draw those shapes from different angles. All right, this I think is done. I just want to, wait. I just want to give him turn down that line work under there a little bit more, and just want to give him a red shirt to go with the picture. And some blue pants. Yeah, he's looking good that day. Looking good that day on the pictures. All right. That is how you stylize human characters. I hope this made sense. I hope this helps you in your journey of character design, whatever project you're working on. Anyways, that's it. I hope you enjoyed it, and we'll see you at the next class.